You are liar.
Oh, and it's still stuck. All right. Cool, cool, cool. See, the alternative is either it shows up for half a second and disappears, or it just keeps playing over and over. Forever. Ah. I'll take playing over and over forever, at the very least. Alright. Are you ready, Flint? Shed did give me a cute pride emote. Nice! Oh, that's cute, this little bee. Let's see how many I have right now. Oh, mine all disappeared. Oh no, they're here. I have half of a hand. Oh, I have a T! Oh, I have a pride T. Amazing. That pride tea though, right? That's so good. It's such a good teacup too. I have with me some rose milk tea. How very fitting, I know. And some water. Just a bunch of water. Hoovered my house. Very ready for this. All right. Let's hop over to our short stories and do some readings. All right. After the end of Deadly Prem, I think I'm ready for this. Oh, the ending gets a bit weird and a bit gross. Huh. I actually have no idea how that game ends, or like, what happens with that plot. Like, I don't even know what the case is about anymore. What was it, some woman who's like, hung or something? That's all I remember. On a tree, and some creepy two children. Or some dude who's like hearing a voice. I don't know. I need to watch a cutscene playthrough of that sometime. You down on the tree, yeah. Maybe like watch a cutscene playthrough, maybe play the second game, or maybe just watch a playthrough of the second game, depending on how the first game ends. She had red seed in her mouth. 100% cutscene playthrough. Yep. I'm I would pause on gameplay playthrough. Yeah, I think the only thing that would keep me going would be like someone that I know personally. Well, not personally, but you know, like Jesse playing it, or Cry playing it, or definitely not Dodger playing it. It'd be very funny to watch Octo play it, but he would like get so upset with all the crashes. But anyway, we're not doing games, we're doing reading. And we've done 4 readings. Now we're on this one, and this one seems to have a continuation, maybe? We'll see. Gotta get my narration voice. Gotta sip a bunch of water. Alright. One, lost. Master, I was wondering if I could ask for some time off. Oh, this is... One autumn afternoon, a young maid stood in Jacopo's study, requesting a vacation. Oh, shit. Hi, Phoenix. Alright, it's at the beginning. Did still spook me, but hello. Welcome, we're just started. As I was saying, one afternoon, a young maid stood in Jacopo's study, requesting a vacation, effectively signaling her intent to quit. He lit a cigar with practiced motions, took in a deep breath, and then blew the smoke out in a long, slow stream. Again, he thought, making sure not to let it show in his face. "What's your reason?" he asked. "Not satisfied with how you've been treated. I feel we've been quite generous." "Oh no, not at all," she said. "In fact, you've been much better to me than my previous house. I have no complaints about the treatment I have received." "Then why? If I knew you would quit so soon, I never would have hired you in the first place. But you've just started showing some improvement. Now all that time and money's gone to waste." "I'm sorry." "I'm asking for a reason, not an apology," he said. His voice a mixture of exhausted, irritated, and scolding that only made the girl recoil further. He let out another heavy sigh. "Are kids these days all this soft? Christ," he thought. Another complaint to add to the mountain built up and locked inside. "It's because, Out with it. You know I don't like it when people aren't straight with me." The young maid looked up at her master apprehensively. His dark brown eyes seemed to pierce straight through her soul, making her feel like she was being squeezed from the inside out. Other maids had told her he was a lot softer than he used to be, but she couldn't imagine that at all. He was a rich, unmarried, testy man in his 30s. Everything about him was terrifying. Despite that, she was willing to face up to him and beg to quit because there was something even worse in the mansion. "The head maid scares me." Jacopo raised an eyebrow. He had been expecting her to say he scared her. "Did the head maid do something to you?" he asked. "No, she didn't." "Then why?" Ash fell from Jacopo's cigar. His irritation levels were rising. The young maid looked up at him, fear in her eyes. Are you not scared of her too, Master? Her appearance never changes at all." The past few years, there had been an increase in maids quitting for vague, non-specific reasons, and he finally had his answer. When Jacopo purchased the mansion, he was 22 years old, taking the first step to expanding his family's influence to the new world. Expectations for him were high, and the pressure was almost suffocating, but he was still an optimistic, ambitious young man at the time. He had to do this, and he had to do it right, and it was that determination that allowed him to maintain the softness in his heart beneath the tough businessman demeanor. Which was probably what led him to hiring the mysterious maid he found in his newly acquired estate. She was there when he first stepped through the door, calling him master,
showing him around the property. Then, once she was done, she started working. Jacopo wasn't sure what to make of the woman, but she seemed to know what she was doing, and over time his suspicion slowly transformed into respect. "Where's your master?" he asked. "My previous master passed away," she said with a perfect smile. "As the new owner of this mansion, you are my current master." Assuming that meant the previous owner had just made no arrangements for her to transfer anywhere else after he passed, Jacopo decided to let her stay and work as she wished. It was the responsibility of those with power to give work to those without, and he felt some satisfaction in taking her in. And for more than 10 years, she did that work almost flawlessly. And as long as she wasn't causing trouble, he didn't see any reason to pry into personal matters. How long she had been there, why she was working as a maid, or who she even was. He never bothered asking her anything. But now, he was 35, and the maid still looked to be in her early 20s, just as she had the day he arrived. Jacopo leaned back in his chair, staring absently up at the ceiling, watching the smoke from his cigar waft upwards. The young maid who quit was long gone, probably living with her family. He'd considered introducing her to a new house, but he'd had so many maids quit on him, he was running out of acquaintances to foist them on. There was a knock on the door. He leaned forward and said, "Who is it?" "It is I," came the voice of the head maid. He called her in, and the woman who stepped through the door was indeed identical in appearance to 13 years prior. She floated gracefully to the center of the office, not making a single sound. He felt almost like he was watching a ghost. "One of the younger maids left today," she said. "So I wanted to discuss with you how we should proceed redistributing the work." "I leave that to you, as always. I'll take care of finding a replacement." "Yes, master," she said with a bow. Usually, that would be the end of the discussion, and she would dismiss herself. But for some reason, she stood there, unmoving, her deep, unreadable eyes of jade locked on his. "What is it?" he asked with a frown, mildly uncomfortable. "Have you considered dismissing me?" she said, wearing the same faint smile she always had on. Her face was like a perfectly carved mask. "I know that some maids have been quitting because of me. They have seen what I look like, and so rumors have been going around. The young girls are especially impressionable, so they are most likely to believe them." "Have you considered dismissing me?" Jacopo tapped his cigar against the ashtray on his desk, then leaned back in his chair. He had considered it before, but he always came to the same conclusion. Every other maid could quit, and it wouldn't slow down work as much as losing you. "Oh my, you think quite highly of me." "I know a capable worker when I see one, and you're more than capable. Hell, sometimes I wonder if you've been doing this job for hundreds of years." My, she said, her smile widening. "You jest. If I'd been a maid for hundreds of years, that would make me a ghost." "Well, aren't you?" he almost said. 5 or 6 years ago, he might have been able to chalk it up to good makeup, but 13 years wasn't something you could just hide like that. Jacopo didn't like talk of ghosts, or the supernatural, or any of that nonsense, but it had reached a point he simply couldn't think of as any natural explanation. "Why don't we have a little chat? I'd like to get to know a little about you." Her eyes went wide at his proposition. It had been a while since he'd seen her make a face other than that pristine smile, and even her surprise seemed artificial. With her, only the most restrained of emotions came across as genuine. "Is it going to rain tomorrow, master? You have never shown an interest in me before." Indeed. You might want to set your overcoat out.
Now what was it you wished to know?
What are you? He asked, not dancing around the question. The head maid gave a little giggle in response.
I am but a mere maid, master.
Yeah, that's what I figured you'd say. Next, who was your previous master?
He was a very precarious man, drifting between man and beast.
What the hell's that supposed to mean? Doesn't sound like a very good master to me. Did he even pay you?
No, sir. The house was in shambles at the time.
He let out another long stream of smoke. When on earth was she speaking of? When he had bought the property, it was a little outdated, but otherwise in good shape. If he took her at her word, that would have been at least 30 years ago. He wanted to press her further, but he knew she would just laugh and brush the question aside. So he took another puff of his cigar and asked, and who was before that?
The father of 2 adorable little children. He was rarely at the house, so his wife, son, and daughter served as my masters. They were a noble family, and they treated me quite well.
Huh. I didn't know nobility had lived here.
My, you believe me, master?
Oh, so you realize it sounds ridiculous, do you?
I understand that it may seem somewhat unbelievable to you, yes.
Well, I'm not completely taking you at your word, and that's for sure. This is just a casual conversation after all, and I know we're all prone to some embellishment. But who was before that?
The sibling's grandfather. He was the man who taught me how to be an a maid. He loved roses, and I would often go out and admire the flowers with him.
Jacopo twitched at the word rose, a reminder of a great mistake he had made years ago. He snuck a glance at the window, closed his eyes, and whispered, I see. All right, he continued. Who was before that?
Before him was...
Her gaze drifted upward. And then, a rift formed in her persona, barely perceptible, but it didn't slip past Jacopo's notice. She still wore that eerie, flawless smile, but hair-thin cracks had appeared in her jade eyes, allowing a carefully hidden murkiness to seep to the surface. For a split second, she seemed to be weary to her core, looking out towards a faraway land she could never reach, and then it was gone just as quickly.
Before him was my dearly beloved, whose return I am still waiting. For that reason, I hesitate to call them my master. I am terribly excited for their eventual return, though.
Sounds complicated, he said. I won't pry any further. She gave a wide smile. It was best to just leave it at that, he thought. They weren't friends. She was a maid, and he was her master. Next question. And I don't know how I never asked you this before, Jacopo said, letting it hang in the air for a second. What is your name? Saying it out loud only emphasized how ridiculous a question it was. He'd had this woman in his hire for 13 years without so much as knowing her name. With every other maid, he knew their name, age, family history, and more before they even signed the contract. But her, he never had a contract for her in the first place, which was unthinkable for a man who didn't even allow himself to make the smallest of mistakes. He had no idea how he could have let this happen. The only explanation he could think of was some unnatural power diverting his attention from it.
My. You can simply call me the head maid as you have all these years.
I'm the master of the house, and I'm telling you to tell me your name, he said in his unflinching business voice, to which she gave him the same smile as ever. And then, when she offered him the name she believed to be her own, the air in the room seemed to crack.
My name is Morgana, master.
Jacopo's eyes went wide. While he wasn't as prone to shouting now as he'd been in his emotionally troubled 20s, that was enough to push him over the edge. "No, it's not," he yelled, unsure why he was so certain. There was another crack in the air between them. He lurched out of his chair, then before sending it toppling to the floor. She, meanwhile, looked only mildly surprised. "No, that name does not belong to you."
Oh my, then to whom does it belong?
It. She giggled. Every second he spent in the presence of that stony smile felt like a knife to the heart. By any reasonable measure, she was in the right. He had no place to deny someone else their name. But deep down, he just couldn't accept that name as belonging to the head maid.
Master, your hand.
He looked down to see his fist clenched around the still-lit cigar. The faint smell of burnt flesh rose up from it, though he didn't even feel the heat. Jacopo threw the crushed cigar to the ground. He had no idea why hearing a single name had sent him into such a frenzy. Not having an explanation only agitated him further. "I think that's quite enough conversation for one day. Please." "Oh."
Just call me the head maid, as you always have. Now do excuse me, master,
she said, and Jacopo could only watch in silence as she drifted out of his office. Jacopo's wife's bedroom was on the second floor, next to his own. Specifically, the room she had used in the early days of their marriage. In response to information shared with him by a good friend, which he trusted blindly, he had moved her to the first floor, and then, still unable to trust her, he had relocated her to an entirely separate building on the property. Her room on the second floor had remained untouched since her disappearance. Knowing she was sensitive to sunlight, he had heavy light-blocking curtains installed on the windows. And then, though the room didn't feel too gloomy, he had furnished it with white fabrics and light wooden furniture. It was all still there. He included the room in the maid's daily cleaning duties, but many of them considered it a waste of time, so occasionally it would be neglected. In the past, he would have yelled at them for that, but now he just gave them a stern reminder to do all their assigned work. Which worked, though he could tell they weren't pleased. No one actually believed his wife would ever come back. After losing everything at the age of 26, he had set out in search of his missing wife, both with his own 2 feet and by hiring private investigators to look all over for her. Even after so many years, he had nothing to show for it. Jacopo was beginning to think himself that she would never be back. But he wouldn't give up, for any reason. She had waited steadfastly for him, even after being broken mentally and spiritually. So he had an obligation to do the same. It wasn't worth much, but it was the least he could do for her, being the one responsible for hurting her so. He wished to have just one last chance, to see her again and atone for all the damage he had done. That was the only thing keeping him alive, now that he had nothing else. He stood quietly in his wife's bedroom. On the desk sat her phenakistoscope, yellowed over the years. He could still see her calling it her phenakis wheel, with a gentle smile on her face. The same smile he had stolen from her and crushed under his feet.
It's a pleasure to meet you.
He could hear her voice as clear as the day they had gotten married. Hers was a soft, almost musical voice, the sound of which he would never forget.
It's a pleasure to meet you. My name is Michelle.
They first met on the day of their wedding, in the waiting room. He was wearing a veil at the time, so it wasn't until they made their vows that he saw the brilliantly affectionate smile on her face. A perfect match for her name, he thought, which came from the archangel, Michel. There was no one for whom an angel's name was more appropriate. But now the pieces had come loose with the head's maid's earth-shaking proclamation. and they were coming together to form a different picture altogether. On the day Jacopo met his wife, somewhere deep down he felt as though he had known her sometime long, long ago, that he had been searching for her that entire time, and wanted nothing more than to bask in the light and smile once more. He would do anything to make sure she never lost it again. He saw a vision of a forlorn graveyard he had never seen before, a young girl crouched before a makeshift headstone, turning back to look at him. A smile, the same as the woman he had married. His eyes went wide, and he thought he was crying, but they were perfectly dry. He had long since lost the ability to weep. Was Michelle really your name? Jacopo's soul was bound by 2 sets of chains, weighted down by 2 great transgressions. He could feel them both distinctly. He understood how terrible the things he had done were, that he deserved no redemption. A few days later, Jacopo was returning from an on-site inspection, decided to pass through the garden on the way. A woman with long black hair crouched before a small flower bed, practically blending into the night. Hearing her master's footsteps, she stood up, brushed the dirt off her skirt, and gave him an ever-flawless smile.
Good evening, master.
What brings you to the graveyard, to the gardens this evening? I was looking for you, he said.
Oh my. You have not been yourself lately, sir. Is it love? Because I am afraid my heart already belongs to someone else.
That's not funny. My heart's already taken too, not by you. She giggled impishly.
You are quite right, master. You would never tell the object of your affection I was looking for you.
Hey, that's your boss you're talking to.
Hee.
Jacopo sighed, glancing over the flower bed. The whole area had once been a magnificent rose garden, but he had ordered it destroyed 9 years earlier. Enough time had passed that he was able to grow out of his irrational hatred of flowers, though. And so it was the head maid's efforts that had brought it back to life, though on a smaller scale for the time being. I apologize for what I did to the rose garden, he said, which elicited a bewildered stare from her. His gaze still averted, he continued. You were fond of the roses too, weren't you? You mentioned coming out to look at the flowers with one of your previous masters. The nobleman, was it? Now that I think about it, you were the one who looked after the garden the most as well. The head maid had let his words hang in the air for a few moments, then gave him a quizzical look. What has gotten into him? She thought. But giving it a bit more consideration, she understood. He had had plenty of time to reflect on his mistakes. Perhaps an apology was not so surprising. She had grown so numb to the passage of time, she had forgotten Jacopo was just a young businessman, still getting his feet wet when they'd first met. So green, he had seen no trouble in hiring a mysterious maid who refused to talk about herself, eventually assigning her the position of head maid. Power, influence, business relationships, restless nights, constant betrayal. The pressures of the life he had chosen had corrupted him, and then, in the wake of a great tragedy, he had managed to rid himself of some of that corruption, but only after he had lost the 2 people to whom that change would matter most.
You need not apologize to me for anything, she said. As a matter of fact, I bear some fault myself for failing to see the truth. I could have stopped you, master, and I could have prevented the destruction of the rose garden too. You're just a maid, he said. You were in no position to see anything I couldn't. I should have caught on to Maria's scheming sooner, and I should have trusted my wife. The truth I had failed to see was not theirs, it was yours, master. Mine? Yes. I failed to see the kindness and love in your heart.
Jacopo glared at the smiling head maid like she just told an offensive joke. If that were true, I wouldn't have been so obsessed with money and personal gain. I wouldn't have killed my closest friend, and I wouldn't have abused my wife.
Were your monetary desires truly as selfish as you claim?
He clenched his teeth, turning away from her clear jade eyes. He felt like she was looking straight through him.
You wanted money, she said, for your homeland, your family, your friend, your beloved. Am I mistaken?
Yes, you are, he spat.
While it was true he wanted money for all those things,
they were not his only motivators.
He'd also wanted it for the power to put himself on the top of the world, safe from anyone who would betray him. But eventually, money and power changed from the means into the goal itself, setting him far off the path. Had he simply kept his eye on his true objective rather than obsessing endlessly over how to protect himself, he could have done more for both Maria and his wife. The head maid gave him a somewhat melancholy smile. If you so insist, master, then yes, I am mistaken. Nonetheless, it is all in the past now, and neither of us can take back the choices we made then.
Precisely. He could say it was all supposed to be for his wife or Maria, but what would that accomplish? Nothing. Allegedly, noble intentions didn't excuse the kind of pain he had caused. He let out a short sigh, casting all those thoughts aside. I was looking for you because I need you for something.
Yes, what can I help you with? She asked.
He turned his gaze towards the mansion, staring up tall, long-abandoned tower. It seemed almost radiant in the light of the full moon. Come with me. When the Jacopo purchased the mansion, it had already gone through repairs to bring it up to the habitable condition. There was just one area that remained conspicuously in disrepair. Initially, he was planning to have the strange decrepit tower demolished. There was no point in having it repaired only to sit unused. So he wanted to replace it with something actually useful, like a storeroom. But for some reason, which he still didn't understand, he could never bring himself to destroy the tower. The entrance to the tower was at the back of what he called the Second Great Hall, a mostly unused hall near the back of the property. There were rumors among the maids about strange sounds and ghosts and blood dripping from the ceiling, going as far back as when Maria was still alive. Back then, he recalled telling her it was all nonsense, that he had no interest in new women's little ghost stories. But the truth was, something did seem off about the hall. Not in a frightening or unsettling way, though. Being there, he felt smothered with guilt and shackled by sorrow. So he avoided going to the Second Great Hall as much as possible. He hadn't even had lights installed in the hall, so stepping through the door felt like entering an entirely isolated realm of darkness. Jacopo and the head maid each carried oil lamps to light their way through the hall. At the far end stood a door not opened in countless years. Just an ordinary wooden door, though with a simple lock, not a heavy metal one with a complicated 3-key lock. As he unlocked the door with his master key, the head maid whispered, "Why did you bring me here?" She considered following it with, "Were you too scared to come on your own?" But even she couldn't bring herself to make light of the things in that tower's presence. I started paying more attention to you recently, after the last maid quit. I noticed when you're not focused on something, you're looking towards one of two places. The former rose garden, or this tower. So I thought it would be best to bring you with me when I came to see the tower.
I see.
The inside of the tower was black as the abyss, even darker than the hall leading to it. The light from their 2 oil lamps revealed a long spiral staircase leading up. And something stirred in the long frozen heart of the head maid at the sight of that staircase. Jacopo set a foot on the first stair, pressing down on it hard in several places. It let out low creaks under his weight, but didn't seem to in danger of breaking. That said, it was still an abandoned tower at night, and nobody knew they were here. This was a terrible idea that could go wrong at any time, and he knew it. Watching him slowly climb the stairs, the head maid's chest grew tight. For an instant, she wasn't seeing him, but someone else. They were holding her by the hand, running up and up and up, and... "Why did you want to see the tower?" she said, trying to bring herself back to the present. "Hell if I know." He tilted her head. He almost never acted without a clear reason. "All I do know is, I got the strangest feeling that I would find something about myself here." "I see," she said, putting on a smile. "I too have a strange feelings that I will find something of myself here." Climbing the decaying staircase was a long, arduous process. Every so often, they passed a window carved out of the stone wall. The light from the moon illuminated the path before them, guiding sinner and prisoner ever upward. After more revolutions than the head maid was able to count, the end was finally in sight. But there was one final obstacle before they could reach the top of the door at the top. The next section of the staircase had collapsed. "Shall we head back?" head maid asked. If they were to attempt to proceed, one of them would undoubtedly slip and take a fall straight down to hell. Oh no. Oh, I feel like I see where this is going. Surely Jacopo would realize there was no way forward and give up. But she was wrong. Leaning against the stone wall for support, he placed his right foot on what little remained of the next stair, and then he carefully guided his left foot to the next. Several slow, meticulous steps later, a chunk of stone gave out under his weight, tumbling downwards into the abyss, but even that was not enough to stop his determined procession. She watched him in silence. She was not afraid that he might fall, however, because if that were to happen, then that simply meant he was fated to die here. It was an insignificant detail to her. As long as she was able to wait for her beloved to return, nothing else mattered. But he made it across the collapsed region unharmed. It seemed the mansion was not ready to be rid of him just yet. He turned around, shining his oil lamp over the gap. "You're free to wait there." No, she said. "I will accompany you." She then gracefully lifted her skirt off the ground and followed the same crumbling path across the chasm he had. When she finally made it across, he gave her a smug smack. "Damn, and here I thought you were gonna float across like a ghost. I guess you really are alive." To which she responded with a little smile. They resumed their climb, soon reaching the top level of the tower. Beyond a door half rotted away sat a chamber with a single window high upon the wall. Through it shone a pillar of moonlight. The two of them entered the chamber, proceeding to the center of the room. The air inside was far colder than the autumn night they had left behind. It chilled them both to their bones, to their souls. Jacopo stood in place, gazing up at the window for some time. Then, he walked up to the stone wall, dropping to his knees in front of what appeared to be nothing at all. He traced the irregular surface with his fingers, his hand slowly forming into a fist and dropping lifelessly to the hard floor. She could hardly see a trace of the powerful, wealthy businessman he was in that slouched form. He seemed so much smaller, on the verge of withering away. "Did you find that something about yourself here?" she asked, her voice carrying well in the cold, empty chamber. "Yeah," he said, his voice shaking. There was far more contained in that single syllable than she could ever have hoped to discern. For a moment, she thought he was crying, but from the glimpse she caught of his face, his eyes were dry, though he looked pale as a ghost. She stepped toward him, gently placing her hand upon his back. And then she spoke, breaking her personal vow to remain an observer. "If you wish to end your life here, I can offer you my hand." The man spun around to face her. There was neither anger nor surprise in his eyes, though. "Why would you say that?" "I do not know," she said. "Seeing you there on your knees, the word simply came out. I felt as though that wasn't what you wanted." She lowered herself to her knees as well, so their eyes were at the same level. He flinched, but did not avert his gaze from hers. "You're right," he muttered, barely audible. "There was a time when I did want that, a long, long time ago. But still, I descended those stairs. I couldn't let myself just toss aside what I had sacrificed everything to attain. Even knowing there was only suffering to be found at the bottom? That's exactly why. I had to own it, just like I have to own my mistakes now." "I see. Then I shall observe and see where this path takes you." "Ah, what a wretched man," she thought, smiling. She was an experienced enough maid to know to keep that thought to herself, though. And she herself was also a wretched woman, who had wanted to die alongside her love at the top of this very tower. And in her broken mind, those memories had been transformed into a fairy tale. The full moon had begun its ascent by the time they had left the cold chamber. At the collapsed section of the stairs, Jacopo crossed first, as he had going up. The head maid then made to follow after him, but was instead greeted to his hand extended across the gap. She tilted her head. Obviously, he was offering her assistance in crossing. But she had made it over with no difficulty the first time, so she couldn't understand why. Not to mention, the master of the house had no obligation to help a lowly maid. But bathed in the glow of the moon, her hand stretched out to take his, before she realized what happened. They had both lost those they cared about most, and when their fingers touched, he saw a bright-spirited young woman with an infectious smile, and she saw a kind-hearted and sometimes sarcastic young man. Giselle and the slave, vestiges of their long-forgotten selves, bursting forth for their tiniest, most insignificant of moments. "Michel, to tell you the truth, I wanted nothing more than to descend those stairs with you, hand in hand." "Morgana, to tell you the truth, I wanted nothing more than to go back to those days when I could still take your hand." By the time the head maid had made it across the collapsed stairs, the shadows of their old selves had disappeared without a trace. Only the maid, who always wore a smile, and the forlorn businessman remained in there in the tower. A faint connection had formed between them, though, a shared isolation and emptiness, an empathy, as similarly damaged souls. But that too would fade in time, their connection as fleeting as an autumn night. With him leading the way, and her following behind, they descended the spiral staircase together. "And what about you?" he asked. "Were you able to find that something about yourself here?" "Yes," she said. "I believe I did, but I fear it will slip through my fingers again before long." "You never struck me as a forgetful type." "I have been for some time. I have no room for new memories anymore." "Well, that's probably for the best," he said. "It would be best if you forgot what
It would be best if you forgot what you found here as well.
Not a chance.
My, she said. You are quite the intractable one.
I could say the same about you.
Hehehe. Say, Master,
What is it?
I want to tell you something before I forget the things I felt tonight.
Yeah?
I was not terribly fond of you when we first met.
Huh. That sounds about right.
But that is not true any longer.
Is that so?
It is.
The truth is, I thought you were creepy as hell at first. Didn't even want to look at you.
Hehe. That sounds about right.
That's not the case anymore.
Is that so?
Yeah, it is.
Oh no, that was really sad. I don't know how this game manages to do this like this so much. Oh man, I'm taking a little break. My throat hurts a little bit. I'm gonna go refill my water too. What a... Man. I know, it's like... It's like I didn't need to know what happened after the end of the third door. And I was like, oh, if I find out what happens, it's gonna kind of ruin it, but it didn't. It's like they don't have to tell you exactly what happened, but... I don't know, I feel like little bits like these are really nice. Yeah, they don't overdo it, for sure. And it gives you a little taste of how both of them are feeling, which is really good, especially with the maid, because, you know, you heard about her story, and then you're like, the way they talk about her, it's like she's so different, but then she's not. Heck. I also got an idea for a drawing, and now I'm like, heck. I just want to visualize all of it. It's so beautiful. I know, she's just like stuck in that shell, and I'm like, no, Giselle. Reincarnation! Just gotta remember, reincarnation happened, and it was great. Alright, I'm gonna BRB real quick. Let me just adjust this. Alright. Oh, hello. I brought my phone because I forgot to set that up. Now I don't have to look to my right all the time and strain myself just to see you. Easy reading. Oh. Phone being close was giving it static. Okay, put it over here. Alright. Shall we continue? Let's continue. To pain. Oh, you're gray again on my phone. Nice. Oh, I don't like this. Beyond ending 4, a moment of hesitation. Oh! A moment of hesitation. How can you be sure that even now, I still love you? Can you deny the possibilities that I no longer yearn for you, but the white-haired girl? Can you deny the possibilities that my love for you has transformed into hate? Farewell, Michel. In a brief moment of hesitation, Michel had abandoned Giselle, leading to the worst possible outcome for both of them. The both of them, and one other as well, a young girl. The girl, however, remained oblivious to her fate. Are you sure you really wanted to let him go? The girl leaned back in a rocking chair before the fireplace, tracing her bottom lip with her skeletal finger. Her face was covered in hideous scars, a fitting look for the witch of the cursed mansion, but it was her devilish smile that left the strongest impact. The maid, who now remembered she was Giselle, was putting kindling on the fire, a task she had done countless times over hundreds of years. But this time, the circumstances were slightly different. Yes, I am sure. Giselle looked up at the witch, distraught. Her already unnaturally pale face was almost entirely devoid of color. Just moments earlier, she had banished the man she loved. She had cast Michel's soul back into the void, sending it off with a wish that he would never find his way back to this mansion. I see, the witch said, still running her finger across her lip. I don't think I'll ever understand. If you hate someone, you should chain them down and torture them for all eternity. It was the perfect opportunity to trap his soul. I do not hate him, Giselle said, causing the witch's bony finger to come to a sudden halt. The witch raised an eyebrow, perplexed, but it was hidden in the shadow of her hood for no one to see. Oh, is that so, my dear? After everything you said, I simply assumed. I could never come to hate him. I could never want to see him dead or tortured. As she spoke, the look of dejection on Giselle's face deepened. However, there seemed to be a hint of relief beneath it, which the witch couldn't comprehend. Oh? Then why did you say what you did? The witch extended her skeletal finger towards Giselle. Giselle sighed, saying, I do not think you would understand. Sometimes you keep your distance from someone because you love them. You sent them back to the normal realm to live a normal life away from you, an undying apparition because you loved them. You never wanted them to set foot in the cursed mansion again because you loved them.
The witch would never understand those desires. She would never understand telling someone, "I don't love you," because you love them. She would never understand lying to push someone away because you love them.
Probably not, the witch said. I am not particularly interested in understanding either. It doesn't matter what happened in the interim. In the end, nothing's changed, has it, my dear? You're still my darling, devoted maid. With enough time, you will once more forget your name.
Giselle slowly closed her eyes. The witch was right. In time, the mansion would eat away at her until there was once again nothing left. However, she no longer felt any fear about losing herself again. Giselle had no one to wait for anymore, which meant she was free from having to despair about him never showing up now. She didn't regret her choice either. As she had shown Michel the events of her own past, she had come to realize that she was no longer that person, that she was merely an unsettling shadow of the woman he had known, and she didn't want to subject him to that. It's for the best. Giselle repeated that phrase to herself again and again. A devilish smile rose to the witch's lips as she watched her gaze slowly sink to the cold floor.
What a wonderful world this is,
she said. She was in complete control of everything, after all. The cursed mansion existed outside reality, an eternal prison where time held no meaning. What one soul perceived as day could be a second or a year for another soul. The witch Morgana awoke from a long rest. She opened her eyes, and there was a fireplace crackling away. Before it knelt a woman with deathly pale skin, feeding the fire with kindling. Morgana had no idea where the maid got the wood.
Oh, hello there.
Good morning. The witch snorted.
Good morning to you as well, my dear,
Morgana said.
How long has it been?
Since when?
Since you cast him out.
Cast who out? The maid said with her usual smile, tilting her head, which was all Morgana needed to hear to know what had happened.
It's been long enough for you to have fully reverted, I see.
Whatever do you mean? The maid asked.
Oh, is this one of your riddles? When have I ever given a riddle? You're the one who likes to make everything you say sound mysterious, my dear.
My, if you say so.
Are you trying to agitate me?
Of course not.
Now, would you like to start your day with a cup of herbal tea?
Morgana sighed. It seemed the maid had indeed fully reverted. She'd had this exchange every single time she woke up since the maid's mind had broken. Even though her own sense of time had dulled as well, having to answer the same questions over and over again was still frustrating. She was the one who had broken the maid's mind in the first place, though, so she understood she had brought this on herself.
I've told you this again and again. I don't need any tea.
And what about breakfast? The maid asked.
I don't need food either. As I've already also told you repeatedly.
The maid pursed her lips into a little pout.
Any food or tea you prepare is nothing but the product of a deluded spirit's imagination, and I would cast myself into the void before touching that, the witch thought, sighing.
Then will you be doing your usual rounds of the house? The maid asked.
I suppose,
the girl said, gazing up at the dark ceiling. Her only real pastime was visiting the three souls trapped here and tormenting them. Sometimes with words, sometimes with visions of the past, and sometimes with her own two hands. Gradually, bit by bit, she chipped away at their souls. As the master of the house, it acted to serve her will. And that influence was especially powerful while it existed outside time, which meant she could do almost anything she pleased. and she had taken full advantage of that ability to torture the souls of the flaxen-haired boy, the beast-like swordsman, and the monstrous lord. She was more than willing to spend the rest of eternity exacting her revenge on the three of them. That said, she felt things were getting a bit repetitive, and with Michel banished, there was no longer any hope of outside entertainment, which left her the only one with the power to mix things up.
It might be time to send them out again.
The maid blinked at her, perplexed, but of course she wouldn't understand. She didn't know about the three souls imprisoned here.
Are you going to release something from the mansion?
The maid said asked quizzically.
I would never,
the witch said, cackling.
They've been placed under a powerful curse, a wish of destruction and reconstruction. And I am going to begin that process again, have them live their third lives. I can't wait to see what terrible ends they meet this time. Aren't you excited, my dear?
Yes, very much so, the maid said, smiling as though she hadn't understood a single word. The witch jumped to her feet, giddy with rancor, imagining the miserable, bloody futures the three terrible men would surely meet had fixed her mood in an instant. They had to suffer for all eternity. They had to endure a fate worse than death. They had to pay for their sins, over and over and over again. Morgana first went to visit the flaxen-haired boy, whose soul was imprisoned in the rose garden. As she approached the double doors, they opened on their own, the rusty hinges letting out pained shrieks. On the other side lay a colorless, withered garden, a sad shadow of its once brilliant colorful splendor. Of course, the witch felt no heartache over the garden's state of decay. A boy's shadow knelt on the ground, almost entirely encased in a briar patch. It was wispy and barely managed to retain its human form. Arms wrapped around his head, he muttered endlessly to himself.
It's not all my fault. I can't take this anymore. Someone get me out of here.
Morgana stuck her chin out, looking down on the pathetic creature before her. Her last time here, he had been a bit more coherent, but now he seemed to be hardly there at all. The flaxen-haired boy's punishment was to relive the day that started it all over and over again. He had to watch dozens of people die during the Harvest Festival celebration, including his own sister. And now that he'd finished his second life as well, she made him watch his mistakes from that as well. Such as the time he called his sister disgusting and pushed her away. The very same sister he betrayed the lakeside witch for.
I never could have known that would happen. I just wanted a normal life. Someone please get me out of here. Would you like me to set you free?
The witch asked. Only then did the shadow notice her presence, looking up at her with his featureless, empty face.
What?
The witch's smirk grew wider.
I said I'm thinking of releasing you.
If the flaxen-haired boy had any strength left to think, he'd have realized this was all a trick, not a sudden display of kindness. But all he could see was an opportunity to escape, and he was going to take it.
Please, let me go.
He didn't even so much as wonder why. The only thing that registered in his feeble mind was the word free. Nothing else mattered as long as he could escape this place. The witch's devilish smirk widened even further.
Very well, then I shall deliver your soul to its rightful place. You are very fortunate to have this chance to return to the mortal realm, my dear.
Thank you so much for your forgiveness. A contorted smile rose to the flaxen-haired boy's face. He then whisked away into nothing, leaving behind only a small breeze to rustle the witch's robe. It took all her strength to not burst out laughing.
Thank you for your forgiveness.
That was brilliant. She hadn't said a thing about forgiving him.
Farewell, Mel.
The witch said, tracing her lip with her bone finger.
We'll meet again soon,
she said. The witch's parting words this time were not until our souls crossed paths once more in the boundless sphere of fate, because she hadn't released him from the curse, so his fate was still bound to her, even as he began his new life anew. So long as he remained subject to the curse, so did the soul of the girl who meant so much to him. Next, the witch went to visit the swordsman. His soul was imprisoned in the cellar from which the stench of blood and flesh emanated. After losing his mind, the twisted killer began destroying everything in sight while howling in some incomprehensible tongue. Perhaps his native language, perhaps not a human language at all. The witch was, in truth, not looking forward to this visit. While the cursed mansion was indeed her domain, her own little realm of the dead, she was still just a regular soul herself. If he were to catch her off guard, he would very well damage her soul beyond repair. The witch held the greatest grudge against a barbaric lord, but she remained the most cautious around the swordsman. With an exasperated sigh, she opened the cellar door. And exactly as she expected, a barely humanoid beast leapt at her the second she did.
Stop this instant!
She shouted, pointing a bony finger at the beast. In the realm of the dead, it was willpower, not physical strength, that ruled, which meant that while the witch had been a helpless girl in life, she was the most powerful being in this domain. At a command, the beast froze mid-motion, a katana held high above his head. He stared wide-eyed at the small girl standing before him, beads of sweat forming on his neck. The beast shouted something in some inhuman tongue. The witch glanced around the cellar. It was littered with corpses, bloodstains on every surface. Perhaps among the bodies was even the woman he called his tether. The witch turned her golden eyes back to the beast. In life, she had been terrified of this man, so scared that she had resorted to opening her door for the flaxen-haired boy, hoping to ask for his assistant. But now there was no fear, only glee at having him entirely under her thumb.
How would you like it if I returned you to the realm of the living?
She asked with a devilish grin. The beast stared at her blankly, his form shifting into something faintly more human.
You're still torn between your two greatest desires, aren't you? Your thirst for blood, and yet you crave a quiet life at the same time. You've already fallen once, lived as a beast, but that wasn't enough to satisfy you. Perhaps the only way to quench your thirst is with the other desire, peace and quiet. And I'm offering you another chance to have that.
Do you mean it?
The shadow's hands were trembling. It took the witch everything in her power to not start cackling at the sight. That abhorrent killer shaking like a lamb.
Yes, I mean it,
she said with a smile. The katana fell from the beast's hands, letting a loud, high-pitched clang when it hit the hard floor. As the sound echoed in the cellar, it sounded almost like 1,000 ghosts screaming.
So you do want to go back to being a man after all?
The shadow dropped his head in a crude imitation of a nod. A hideous beast and his most benevolent savior, it was a scene that could have easily taken place between him and the white-haired girl in his second life. Of course, the witch's intentions were nothing like hers. And by the witch's mercy, the beast was freed. With his disappearance, the countless bodies stacked up in the cellar vanished as if they had never been there. Only the smell of blood remained to remind you of the carnage. The witch then burst out laughing, unable to hold it back any longer.
Oh, that was brilliant. Do you really think you'll ever be able to find peace? No, you'll just kill whoever holds you back and descend into madness, no matter how much you resist. And this time, you're going to turn everyone on you and die a sad, miserable, gruesome death.
Her cackling echoed in the cold cellar for some time. Her final stop was to see the man she despised more than anyone, the Lord. That monstrous savage. The mere thought of him filled her head with a pitch-black rage. He had ruined her life and tainted her soul. He was the cruelest, most barbaric of all of them. He held disgusting blood sabbaths, turning a saint into a spectacle. The witch despised all three men, but her loathing for the Lord, the ultimate root of her suffering, was far, far greater than the other two. She made her way to the den on the second floor. Cigarette smoke seeped out into the hallway, a smell as sad as the man waiting inside. When she opened the door, a cloud of smoke escaped, and only then was she able to see inside. Sitting on the edge of the billiard table, with his head drooped, was the third shadow, again barely able to maintain a human form. A few seconds later, he noticed the witch's presence and stumbled off the table, shuffling precariously towards her. He extended a hand for her in grief and overwhelming regret, but the witch only saw it as a threat. He was trying to hurt her, as he had done so many times in life, to save himself. "Don't you dare touch me," she said, causing his hand to freeze in the air. It formed the chasm between them, boundlessly wide and unfathomably deep. One he would never be able to cross. "Rejoice, Lord," the witch said with a devilish grin. "I'm setting your soul free." The shadow just stood there, staring at her. He didn't rejoice at the news, and in fact seemed to be rather upset by it. He opened his mouth to try to say something, but only strained gasps escaped from his lips. The witch tilted her head. The other two had been thrilled to hear they were being set free, but she was not expecting this reaction. "Ah," she said with a nod. "I see what it is. You realize that this was a trick and that I'm really sending you out to your third doom. I suppose being the Lord for so long, you would need a sense for danger." The man was desperately trying to communicate something to her, but with each attempt to use his voice, it only got less and less comprehensible. If he couldn't speak, he would have to try something else. So he dragged his legs forward, towards the witch. "You will never lay another finger on me," she commanded, pointing a skeletal finger at the shadow's feet. Heavy black chains, strongly reminiscent of those that had been used to seal the observation tower door, appeared from the floor and wrapped themselves around his ankles, digging deep into his skin. Shadow fell to his knees, and the sound of rattling metal echoed in the den.
Oh, what a sorry sight. The former lord of a large territory and the head of a mafia family on his hands and knees, utterly helpless. How does it feel being looked down on by a mere commoner? It must be absolutely humiliating.
Shadow screamed, still mostly indecipherable, but more so than before. His intense desire to get through to her was beginning to show an effect. The witch cackled, glaring down at the pathetic creature before her. She knew how prideful a man he was. He was undoubtedly trying to assail her with curses and promises of vengeance. And oh, how delightful it would be to completely break him.
Go on, my dear. Tell me how much you despise me. Take it nice and slow. You can do it.
He crouched before the shadow, peering into his eyes. He didn't have a face to read an expression from, but she could still feel his desperation. He groaned and grunted until finally he was able to form words. "I want to make amends." The witch froze. It took her several seconds to comprehend what he had just said. Had he just asked to make amends? The Lord, the man who had held those dreadful blood Sabbaths, tortured slaves for fun, and was concerned only about satisfying his own desires, wanted to atone. For what purpose? I made you into the witch. I will do anything you want. I want to make amends. Shut up. The witch stepped back away from the Lord. She was rattled, and her face contorted in confusion, luckily hidden by her hood. Right. This was just a ploy to escape from her curse. He was offering atonement in the hope that she would show him mercy. Well, he was a fool. She had no mercy to spare. The only thing she had in her heart was boundless hatred. Having regained her composure, the witch decided she would make him pay for attempting to worm his way free with an empty show of grace. She turned her gaze toward the shadow-cloaked ceiling, and made a wish. In her mind, she envisioned the long sword the Lord had held above her head. And a few moments later, that very blade descending from the void, the time-worn sword rattled to the floor beside the Lord. Raising her fleshless arm, the witch pointed at the blade with a smirk. If you wish to atone for what you've done, you will have to suffer the same pain as I did. Take the blade, and with it sever your own arm. And should you refuse, that proves you a heartless tyrant only capable of hurting others, she meant to say, but couldn't finish. What? The sound spilled unbidden from her lips as a mass of shadow made a thump against the dense carpet. Jet black liquid spurted from his left shoulder, staining the area around him. He hadn't even hesitated. What next? The shadow plunged the bloody sword into the ground, leaning against a hilt for support. He was breathing heavily from the pain, but still he asked for more, knowing a single arm didn't compare to the agony she had been made to endure. The witch stared at him, flabbergasted. What on earth was happening? Was this the kind of man the Lord was? No, forget that. Regardless of whatever he was doing now, he had still locked her in the observation tower and killed her. He was a brutal, savage murderer, and nothing changed that. He had to be. He had to be. What do you want me to do next? What will bring you relief? Ugh! Morgana. Silence! The witch's mind was a mess. Something seemed wrong, but her soul refused to let her see what. Pain that she had long since buried was drifting back to the surface. As anger and hatred bubbled furiously in her gut, she twisted her lips into a smile and proclaimed, "Very well then, as you wish. I'll let you experience the full extent of the pain and helplessness I was made to suffer." And so, she put the Lord through all the pain and suffering and despair she had gone through in life, covering his body in wounds from head to toe and draping the den in a thick layer of black blood. It was the witch's very own blood Sabbath. The black shadow lay in a twisted mound in the center of the sea of blood, occasional strained gurgles, the only sign anything remained inside. He had endured the entirety of his 16 years of life in the tiniest fraction of that time. As a result, his soul was on the brink of disappearance. The witch was breathing heavily as well. In the process of administering his punishment, she had had to relive it as well, creating brand new wounds in her soul. It had been centuries since she'd last been hurt by her past. "That's enough," he said. "I'm sending your soul back out into the world so you can begin your third life, and your third tragedy. I will never let your suffering end." Coughing up blood, the shadow lifted his head, shaking it weakly. He didn't object to the suffering, only doing it in the mortal realm. It had to be here, with her, where she could see it. He had so much he wanted to say, but only the strength left in his lips to put one sentiment into words. That he wanted to atone, of course. That was the only thing he truly desired. The witch bit her lip. These incomprehensible feelings he kept dragging out of her were driving her mad. The very fact that she was unable to retain her composure was only a source of further agitation.
Are you incapable of saying anything else? If you're capable of feeling remorse, why would you do any of that to me in the first place? Why did you hold all those blood sabbaths? Why did you make a spectacle of me? Why did you torture your slaves for fun? Why did you call me a witch? Why did you lock me up and murder me?
He likely wanted to tell her she was wrong, but because not everything she said was false, he couldn't. And he didn't have the strength or clarity of mind to explain it in detail. So all he could do was cling to his self-destructive wish for atonement.
I will never be able to understand you, Lord.
The witch's mental state was beginning to shift again, not for the better, though. The only person capable of untangling the massive knot that had formed was no longer around, which meant it would only continue to get more and more tangled. And she was starting to think she'd rather be rid of him entirely than have him suffer for all eternity. The longer she kept him around, the more chances he would have to beg to make amends. But she was done with that. She was done with the Lord's nonsense. And she was done with feeling like a mess because of him.
Okay then, as you wish. This wasn't part of my plan, but I'll let you have your final atonement.
As she spoke, she bent down and picked up the sword with her skeletal hand.
By giving me your head.
He didn't object, and he didn't try to run. Instead, he pushed himself up with his right arm, dropping his head and exposing his neck to her. Morgana looked down on him with disgust. She tightened her grip on the sword, pretending not to notice a faint trembling in her hand.
Farewell, Lord. May your soul be forever extinguished from this world.
With those words, she ended the Lord's life once and for all. And with his death, the truth scattered into the wind. Morgana's robe was heavy with black blood. She was exhausted. She thought having her revenge would take a huge weight off her shoulders, but instead, she just felt lethargic. She wanted to get back to the warmth of the fireplace and go down for another nice long sleep. But when she opened the door to the hallway...
Have you finished your business?
She came face to face with the maid, her jade eyes glimmering unnaturally. Morgana took half step back. What was she getting spooked for? She was the most powerful being in this domain. She was in complete control. The witch gave a little humph to mask her momentary stumble, then said,
Yes, I finished. Now tell me, is the fireplace going? I'm rather tired and would like to rest.
But of course, Morgana. I put fresh kindling onto fire not long ago. It should be nice and warm for your nap.
Very well.
Morgana lowered her gaze and made to leave the maid behind. But then she realized something seemed very wrong. How does the maid know my name? A chill ran down her back. If the maid's mind was still broken, she would never call Morgana by that name, because she believed it to be her own. Cold jade eyes remained affixed on Golden. A smile spread across the maid's lips. The witch could not, though.
Are you Giselle?
If so, why? Why would she pretend to be to be mad if she still retained herself? What was her objective? Why was she wearing that unsettling smile if she was Giselle? Who on earth was she? For the first time, She felt something like fear for the maid, for Giselle. She was the witch, though. She was supposed to be the one everyone else feared. She was the master of the house. She was the most powerful being in this tiny domain. So why did she feel like Giselle of all people had taken the upper hand? She had to have been imagining it. Giselle was her faithful maid, and she was the all-powerful witch. However, that dynamic only existed as it did because Giselle had Michel to wait for. Her one source of hope and her weakness. But now that he was gone, and Giselle no longer had any hope, would she really stay in Morgana's servitude for eternity?
While you were asleep, I spent some time organizing my thoughts. Is that so? The witch said. It is. After Haydn's death, you told me of the 3 men who wronged you, and of your enmity for them. That may have happened, yes. And then you told me how you made a wish for them, a wish that they would undergo reconstruction and meet their tragic demises again. Yes, what of it? Something about it doesn't quite sit with me. I've only heard of the events from your perspective, so I can only speculate on what that means. But a story told from one perspective is necessarily colored by that perspective. If the speaker believes something, it becomes true within the telling, regardless of the reality of it. I'm quite familiar with this phenomenon, as I have fallen into its trap before. What are you implying? Are you trying to say I'm wrong about what happened to me? I cannot say, and the only one who could is no longer with us. Any chance we had of knowing the truth is now lost forever. However, unlike you, I was there with all 3 of them for their second lives, and in particular, my impression of the man in the 3rd door who you refer to as the Lord does not line up with your depiction of him in certain ways. Would you really call him a heartless monster? Why wouldn't I? The witch said. He passed goblets of my blood around to noblemen like wine. Does that sound like someone who has a heart? Giselle didn't back down in the face of Morgana's intense glare. In fact, she took another step closer. Morgana was starting to feel like she was at a disadvantage, despite full confidence she was right. And what if you were mistaken about some fundamental detail? Mistaken? No, there was nothing to mistake. The Lord was a monster. He was one when he drained her blood for feasts, and he was one when he locked her in the tower. That was the simple truth of it. Why then did she feel like her chest was in a vice every time she told herself that? Why had her hand shaken before killing him? And why on earth did her mind keep imagining him begging to atone as someone completely unrelated? For a heartbeat, a vision of that lonely graveyard swelled up in her mind. Standing there was a slave man whose name and face and voice she had long forgotten, the one who had taught her kindness. I chose not to stop you, Zoe, Giselle said. And why do you think I did that? Enough games. Out with it already. What are you scheming? Oh, I would never. I simply wanted one thing. For you to lose everything as well. The witch glowered at Giselle, who was still wearing the same lonely smile. She had no idea what that inscrutable woman was trying to say. She had already lost everything. That was what had driven her to become the spiteful witch in the first place, drifting outside time for all eternity. Giselle placed a hand on the witch's cheek. Jade and golden eyes locked mere inches apart. And there, the witch's gazed into the eyes of another witch. You surrendered yourself to hatred, becoming a witch who brandishes curses. And I surrendered myself to solitude, becoming a witch who brandishes dissolution. This is a world too painful to live in if you don't love solitude, after all. No, there's only one witch. Me. And why might you think that? Because I'm the one who started it all. I'm the one who created this mansion, and I am its master. I bear more hatred than anyone. I'm the one. As departed souls, we are formed by our will and our emotions. How do you know my despair, sorrow, and solitude aren't stronger than the hatred that makes you? And then, with an unsettlingly cold smile that radiated pure emptiness, the smile of the true witch, she offered the girl one final thought. Can you be certain the lord you killed was the same lord? And with those words, that tiny, insignificant realm became devoid of even pain.
Reincarnation, reincarnation. This ending didn't happen. It didn't happen. None of this happened. We didn't get that achievement. Nope. Not on this save file. Not on the PS4 version, so it doesn't count. Ah, jeez. I like the first 3 stories more. They were happier. Can we go back to Revenant's dream? I want to go back to the dream. Boy Meets Girl. Hopefully. I'm hoping one of these stories are just like... And then it's just a date between Michelle and Giselle. It's just another date. It's just like, going Scarlet in the coffee house. Just a nice date. Oh, jeez. I'm looking at a couple of these and I'm like, It says Scarlet, and here's what I'm thinking, right? Who is the only character in this with red hair? Finkus. Reincarnation for Imian! Wait, what? Why isn't it letting me... Oh, there we go. Yeah, Cup of Kindness. Oh, that's the last one! Oh, please end on a really happy note. I really wanted to end on a good note. Please, please, please. Alright, we'll do one more maybe? Maybe 2? I don't know. It is currently... It's almost 7, and... Yeah, we got time. Let's do another one. I don't need a break this time. My voiceness is fine. It's more just like, I feel like I'm a little stuffy sometimes. Like I have an almost cold. But it's good. I'm fine. It's not hurting. It's just, you know. It's more, honestly, I forgot how emotional reading this gets me. Like... I remember now why we didn't do it on Saturdays and Sundays. Versus like, you know, Danganronpa or other stuff where it's like, you know, we're reading a bunch, but it's not the reading. It's like, man, I can't take it. I need to like have a break. Like, it's not bad, it's just, I need a break. I need to like think a bit. Like, take it all in. Like, there's still really nice moments. Like, I feel like Lost had a very nice moment. And I like that they didn't make the maid evil at the end of Pain. They didn't just go with the whole plot twist, she turns evil because of all that, because that's not in her character. was just sad. They're just sad. And she just lost all hope. I mean, that's fair. I'm surprised she didn't just break earlier. But yeah, let's do boy meets girl. We'll see where this goes. Oh, this already sounds happy. Oh, Is this a feature? Is this a feature? Michel was bored out of his mind. His family had always been very overprotective, but at the age of 10, he was still afforded a lot of freedom. He wasn't quite old enough to have to start acting like an adult yet, and in the light of what fate had in store for him much later, this would turn out to be one of the happier periods of his life. Alright, this is old times actually, but hopefully a happier time back then. Even as a child, Michel understood his place within the Bollinger family. He was obedient and did his best not to step on anyone else's toes, but bottling up his desires for so long put them at the risk of blowing up. Especially on days like this where there was an opening. His mother, who said, "Listen to your mother," as though it were part of her breathing, just so happened to be out of the house. So he wanted to do something different, to let out all his pent-up boredom. He wanted to make this into a day he would remember. And since his mother had taken many of the servants with her, there was no one to get on his case if he acted out a bit. However, he had no idea what to do with this newfound free time. It was just drifting past him, every passing moment another moment wasted. I'll just have to ask Georges. He may have been a precocious child, but Michel was still a child nonetheless, and he genuinely believed his brother would have some idea of what to do. If his eldest brother Didier had been around, Michel could have gone to play chess with him or watched him train, but regrettably, only his eccentric middle brother was home. 10 days earlier, regrettably, Georges had proclaimed he was going to paint a masterpiece. Michel hadn't seen him since. Maybe he was dead. That would kinda suck. Michel didn't want to have to deal with reporting a body. Michel! Though in all seriousness, his brother was probably just in his special place and had lost track of time. That would kinda suck. Michel made his way- He made his way to his brother's room, a process that would usually involve running into half a dozen servants, but today, the Bollinger estate was quiet as a graveyard. He felt like humming as he walked through the corridors, but couldn't think of any songs. If only he wasn't so ignorant about the arts and recreation, maybe he wouldn't be such a horribly boring person. But today, Michel wasn't in the mood for those kinds of depressing thoughts. He stood before the door to his brother's room, knocked timidly, and then let himself in. I forgot how self-deprecating and sarcastic Michel can be, even in his own thoughts.
Hey, Georges, do you have... he said, but he was unable to finish the sentence.
His brother was splayed out on the floor like a corpse. He really had found a body. Michel stood in the door. Oh.
Hey, I'm back. Where's my cup? Oh, there it is. Hi, Degen. You're here at a much happier time, I think. You came at a nice, happy moment. And missed the story before. Whew, alright, let's continue. Oh, also we found a dead body, so... Michel stood in the doorway, frozen and useless like one of his brother's sculptures. The air in the room was stale from having been closed for so long. Georges? After several long minutes, Michel was finally able to use his voice again. He ran over to the body and dropped on his knees, shaking his brother's shoulders and on the verge of tears. See? He joked about it, but he's actually sad. This was his punishment for saying it would suck having to deal with a dead body. Georges, please, come back to me. What happened? Ha! Ah! The corpse lurched forward, causing a breeze that stunk of paint. Michel shuffled backwards on his knees, his heart pounding so hard it felt like it would jump out of his chest. Georges gazed stupidly at his in-progress painting, heaving a heavy sigh. Poor baby Michel. Are you okay, Georges? Maybe you should get some rest. Oh, you didn't see you there, Michel. It's just Michel. Michel wanted to disappear. He felt like an idiot for getting so worked up over someone only to have them see straight past him. That's all you have to say? After worrying me like that? Huh? I was just sleeping. Nothing to worry about. Your bed is for sleeping, not the floor. Georges chortled. Did you need something? Yes, Michel said. Mother and most of the servants are out of the house for the day. There's some kind of trouble? No trouble. Georges tilted his head until it was almost horizontal. A few moments later, he clapped loudly and said, Aha! So you're bored! He was right, but Michel couldn't bring himself to just say, Yes, I'm bored, please give me attention. So he averted his eyes and said instead, I would not say I'm bored, but it's just so rare for the house to be so empty and I... Georges chuckled. You're right, he said with an impish smirk. Michel braced himself, fearing his brother was going to tease him. We all need a change of pace every once in a while. Some real excitement to mix things up. I've been running short on inspiration these last few days too. So he was not ready for what his brother said instead. Let's go out on the town, Georges proclaimed, at which Michel went positively bug-eyed. Oh shit. Now this is a point that bears repeating. Michel's family was very overprotective of him, in part because he was so sensitive to the sun, but mostly because he was a daughter of noble blood. He wasn't a vampire, so the sun wouldn't kill him, but because of the circumstances of his birth, he was almost never allowed to go into the city. If he was lucky, he got to go down once a year, but always for some kind of business. The city was like a giant cave filled with gold and jewels, but guarded by a big, ferocious, poisonous dragon, and he could only ever see a little bit of it. So he was thrilled. So much so that he had been raised with fewer hawks watching over him. He probably would have broken into dance and maybe even a musical number. But he knew how to restrain himself, and restrain himself he did. When they arrived at the capital's central district, it was much busier than Michel had expected. There were people everywhere, going every which way, doing anything and everything and even more. Someone was shouting from a shop, trying to attract customers. Their voice was rough and deep and loud. Nothing like the quietly refined voices of everyone at home. A cat sat perched atop a barrel, covered in filth, glaring at Michel with eyes that seemed to glow. His mother would probably hate this. Her anxiety was too strong. She would say it was too loud and unrefined, refusing to even set foot here.
But Michel thought there was a beauty specifically in the discord. Georges laughed merrily at the sight of Michel looking around in wonder. "Looks like we're in it for even more excitement than we bargained for," Georges exclaimed. "Is it not safe here in the city?" "Oh, heck no it ain't! You let your guard down for 3 seconds and you're dead meat. Don't listen to anyone who says they have something good for you, hear me? 9 times out of 10, they're gonna toss you in a big black cauldron and eat you right up. That's just how it is in the big city." "What?" Michel went pale as a ghost, and 3 seconds later, Georges burst out laughing. He'd been tricked. Michel flushed bright red. His cheeks were getting quite a workout today. "If there's anyone I shouldn't listen to, it's you, Georges." "I ain't lying, just playing a little joke, that's all." "Only a little kid would fall for that, haha." One of these days, Michel was gonna get Georges back, beat him at his own game. "This," his brother said, giving him a quick wink, "this is the excitement I was talking about." He placed an outstretched finger on Michel's chest, right above his heart, and pushed gently. "There's gonna be some real fireworks if anyone realizes who you are." He was right. Michel's mother would tear his head off if she found her daughter was wandering around town in commonest clothing. He wore a battered brown robe instead of an elaborate dress, and his hair was tied back and hidden inside a hat. At a glance, no one would clock him as a noble girl, but he still felt awkward and out of place, and people were more likely to notice that. Georges, meanwhile, had done this before, and he really owned the commoner look. If Michel didn't know better, he would think his brother was a traveling troubadour or something. "You really are a strange man, Georges." "You're just now figuring that out, kid." "No, just... that's part of my charm." "I hope one day I can be as confident as you." Georges was probably the only person in the house who considered trouble fun. If Michel had asked one of the servants to help sneak him out into the city, they would have certainly taken off running, shouting about how they didn't want to lose their head. As a Bollinger himself, Georges would likely be allowed to keep his head, but even he wouldn't get off scot-free for this. Michel was glad he had Georges here with him. He didn't say that, though. Partly from embarrassment, and partly because he knew he'd be teased for it. "Georges' best bro!" "So where should we go?" "Want to hit the pub, grab some cheap booze, and toss the silver at the bard?" Maybe we should ease into things." "That's a lot to start with." "It's not like I'm taking you to a monster's den. Just relax, it'll be fun." "A pub is still no place for children." "Come on, I may be a dunce, but I'm not dumb enough to take you to some seedy back alley joint." "Most of the pubs along the main road are basically restaurants during the day. Some even have inns in them. There'll be lots of very nice people." "If you say so." Michel was less comforted and more terrified at the prospect of there being lots of people. A part of him was still interested. Not to mention, he wouldn't be going alone. So he gave a hesitant nod. "If you're scared, you can just hold my hand," Georges said. "Forward march, my young soldier. Follow my lead." Michel wasn't happy about his sprightly, airheaded brother playing him like a fiddle, but this was a battle his pride couldn't win. Holding onto his brother's pant leg, they set off down the bustling street together. But not for long. Michel stood flummoxed in the middle of the street. He looked left, no Georges. Right, no Georges. Had he gotten lost? No! No way. He had been right there just moments ago. There were just too many people around and he'd lost sight of his brother for a second. He wasn't lost yet. Michel was better than that. He would never get lost. But his pride couldn't change reality. They were on their way to the pub when Georges had run into a girl he knew and started talking. It didn't seem like they were going to finish anytime soon, so Michel had decided to wander around and explore the area. One thing led to another, and now he'd completely lost sight of his brother. Refusing to accept that he was lost, Michel started chasing after people the same height and build as George's. When one turned out to be wrong, he went after another, and another. Before he knew it, he was well off into the main road with no idea how to get back. This area was much quieter than the main street. Not being familiar with cities, Michel couldn't tell if it was a good kind of quiet or a bad one, though. Maybe he just wandered from the trade district to the residential one, or maybe he'd ended up in some back alley where no one could hear him scream. If the latter, he needed to get out of there and fast. Back alleys were the home of ruffians and other unseemly types, after all. And who knew what they would do if they found out he was a noble? That, compounded with the fact that he was too shy to ask for help, and too self-conscious to let himself be seen crying or even shaking, left him stuck there with just biting his lip. Oh, why did none of my books say this what to do when you get lost? And soon enough, he was directing his frustration at innocent bystanders. But then he caught sight of a stout woman around his mother's age watching him intently.
9 times out of 10, they're gonna toss you in a big cauldron and eat you right up.
George's words played back in Michel's mind. He knew it was a lie, and the woman appeared rather friendly and not at all like a child-devouring witch. But Michel was all alone right now, so everyone seemed dangerous. He was like a high-strung cat. Michel glared back at the woman so she knew he wouldn't go down without a fight. As soon as they locked eyes, she spoke. He couldn't make any sense of what she said, though.
My, look at you two little sweethearts, shopping together. You're so grown up.
What? 2 little sweethearts? What was she trying to disorient? What was she trying to disorient him by spouting nonsense so she could kidnap him while his guard was down and demand a ransom from his family?
Hey, mister,
came a voice as someone tugged on his robe. He spun around to find a small girl looking up at him and sucking her thumb, evidently the source of the voice.
Who are you?
She asked. No, who are you? He stared at her, flummoxed for the second time that day.
What an interesting story.
My daddy got lost,
The girl said. I think you mean you got lost.
Are you lost too, mister?
No, it's my brother who's lost.
He's so cute.
We're the same!
My situation is nowhere near as bad as yours, thank you. Michel listened to what the girl had to say, doing his best not to explode at her. She was apparently 3 years old and had gotten separated from her father while out shopping. His hands were full enough trying to figure out what to do with himself. The last thing he needed was to have to look after a lost toddler on top of that. He really should have asked the woman for help as soon as he had noticed her, but by the time he'd collected himself enough to do anything, she'd already said goodbye and disappeared. Unable to find her again, Michel was stuck dealing with the calamity all on his own. He couldn't just leave her there either, as much as he didn't want to deal with it. He was the older one here, and he had to set a good example for her. So Michel bent down to match the girl's eye level and said, "Let's get you home. I'll help you find it." Can you remember anything near your home that might help us find it? Michel asked. The girl ummed and uh'd for several minutes before shouting,
Oh, I do.
Perfect, what is it? Maybe this whole lost kid ordeal would be over sooner than expected. He let out a sigh of relief. Don't. Not with a child.
A brown cat.
Exactly. Which immediately turned into a sigh of disappointment. Cats move, Michel said. One sec.
I'm back again. Back to this lost child dilemma. It's an amazing story.
Cats move, Michel said.
It has really mean eyes.
Oh, forget about the cat already. Can you think of anything else that doesn't move?
I know. Monsieur Casimir's always sitting outside.
No people either.
Oh, why not? He never ever moves from his favorite spot.
I need something easier to find, like a building or something.
Oh, there's lots of buildings,
The girl exclaimed.
The lady next door has a big flower garden, and they're really pretty and red.
Not like that. Ugh, no one's going to know about your neighbor's flower garden. There has to be something big that anyone would. Michel realized he was getting genuinely angry and stopped himself there. The girl's eyes had gotten wide and watery, and it looked like the dam could burst any second. He closed his eyes and shook his head, disappointed in himself. Here he was, getting mad at a 3-year-old girl who was just doing her best to answer his questions.
Are you mad at me?
She asked. No, I'm not mad at you. Michel took a deep breath, letting it out slowly to release some of his frustration. He needed to adjust his expectations. She was just a little kid, and she wasn't always going to know the right thing to say. What am I supposed to do then? He'd been raised in almost complete isolation from the world, with only adults around to interact with. Even his brothers were a good deal older than him, so he'd never been in a situation where there were so many barriers in communication, and he was utterly clueless as to how to handle it. Would he actually even be able to help the girl get home?
Gems!
Said the girl out of nowhere, interrupting Michel's train of thought. She reached her soft, pudgy little hands up and patted his cheeks with it, right beneath his eyes, at which he froze, dumbstruck. 1 second she was on the verge of tears, the next her eyes were glimmering inquisitively. His eyes are so beautiful. What was she even talking about? Where did gems come from? This is just how little kids are, I guess. I wonder if I was like this at her age too.
Isn't Michel like 12 or something?
Do your eyes hurt?
She asked. Huh? Why would they?
Because you got gems in them.
Oh, so that's what she meant. His red eyes. Michel understood now, but he wasn't very thrilled about the topic. He didn't like the color of his eyes, or his hair, or his skin. It was all because of them that he had to be holed up his whole life. That's just what color my eyes are. There are no gems in them, and it doesn't hurt.
Wow, they're so pretty.
Pretty? Michel blushed a little at the compliment, despite thinking just moments ago he would rather talk about literally anything else. He received compliments on his eyes often enough from his mother and the servants, but this was the first time one had ever felt genuine, with nothing behind it. When his mother said his eyes were pretty, she was envisioning him as an angel sent down to earth. When the servants did it, it was because of their status. They never said anything about him and only him. But the girl, she was. There was no jealousy or pity or scorn or anything else to her words. She was simply excited about the eyes and thought them pretty. I think normal eyes are much prettier myself, he said. Oh, well, without other stuff. Okay, let's go where there is more people to start with, he continued. Michel stood up, hesitated for a few moments, and then extended his hands. The girl grabbed it excitedly, which made him feel like he was the only one anxious about the whole thing.
I'll come with you, mister. You need someone to help you find your brother.
You're the one who's lost, remember? Wait, mister?
Wait?
Oh, Michel just now realized she'd been calling him mister this entire time. He'd forgotten that Georges had dressed him up like a boy, saying it was safer that way. How was he supposed to feel in this situation? Upset that she'd guessed wrong? Embarrassed? Ashamed of himself for deceiving her? The emotion that welled up in his chest was none of those, though. Instead, Michel felt something that seemed entirely inexplicable at the time, a mixture of joy and pride at someone finally acknowledging him for who he was. A faint smile spread across his face. "Yes, I am a boy," he said, letting each word linger on his lips. It felt so much better than any comment about his eyes. They wound their way down the streets, Michel occasionally working up the courage to ask someone for directions, and after repeating the process several times, they finally made it back on the main road. Michel wasn't sure if this was the same road, or if it was the same road where he had gotten separated from George's, though. The capital was massive, and it seemed like every other street was called Main Street. As they stepped out on the throng, the clock struck noon. The pealing of the bell brought with it another wave of people. They looked to be artisans of all sorts heading out for their lunch breaks. Apparently, this main street collected a bunch of workshops on it. The artisans were all big men with even bigger arms. Their professions was making things by hand, and you had to be well built to do the job well. Michel found himself enchanted by the parade of muscles, following each one with his eyes as they passed by.
You want to be like them, mister?
I don't know. I haven't really thought about my future much. Michel grimaced. It wasn't that he hadn't thought about it, but that he didn't want to. He knew all too well he could never be an artisan or a knight or even a painter.
I kind of want to be a craftsman,
The girl said.
They can make anything they want.
Girls can't be craftsmen.
Why not?
Well, that was just how the world worked. Those were the rules and you had to follow them. End of story. Michel was only 10 and he knew that. Not even 12. He knew what a girl's role was, and soon enough she would come to know all that as well. That growing up meant giving up on your dreams. I'm not sure, actually. At first he just didn't want to shatter a 3-year-old girl's hopes, but the more he thought about it, the more dissatisfied he felt with the system too. Why didn't he get to choose how to live his own life? Why did he have to be stuck on this dark and narrow road his whole life? What would you want to make as a craftsman? Michel asked to take his mind off this whole dead-end future. The girl's eyes lit up.
Leather sandals and bags,
She proclaimed. That's quite practical. He had assumed she would say something more cute and frivolous, like toys and sweets, or even something completely outrageous like stars.
so we can put them out.
Put them out, not put them on. Wait, was she... Does your family run a shop? Ah!
Yup.
Okay, so she was a daughter of a merchant. Which meant they were probably close. The artisans' workshops and the merchants' shops were likely to be set up near one another. I'm gonna lose my mind because we haven't seen a single description of this little girl. Michel looked out to ask if she recognized anything in the area. Because thinking about it, she is like considerably younger than Michel. Like, oh, she's 3 years old, Michel's 10, Giselle is 7 years younger than Michel. Oh!
Hey, wait!
Hey, wait! If he lost sight of her now, he would probably never find the girl again. So he ran off after her, slamming into large, muscular men only a few seconds later. Watch it! The man shouted, his voice so powerful Michel thought it might send him flying. His gut tightened. No one had ever yelled at him like that before, but he wasn't going to stop just because he got a little scared. He only met the girl earlier that day, and he didn't even know her name, but he was determined to get her back to her parents. Yeah, she hasn't developed her accent yet. Giving up now wasn't an option for him. The girl weaved through the crowds effortlessly, like a sprite out of a story. Meanwhile, Michel was crashing into people at every 3 steps and was beginning to fear he was actually making negative progress. A long life, at last, he made it through the river of people and caught sight of her again. But what he saw made his jaw drop. She charged at an older man, latching onto his leg. The man looked down at her, his eyes narrowed as if he was frowning, or about to start crying. He was very clearly the girl's father. In addition to his relief at their reunion, he also found himself surprised at the father's reaction. His only image of a father was a strict and oh, this is sad. Because we know that her dad dies of the plague. His only image of a father was a strict and impassive man, not someone who would show so much concern and compassion for his daughter. His father cared more about putting on an appearance of strength than showing love for his family. He would certainly never cry over one of his kids. That would make him look weak. And Michel had always thought that that was just how fathers were. But there was nothing weak about the girl's father being so happy to have her back. "Are you the one who found my little pumpkin?" A father walked over to where Michel was standing, grabbed both of his hands and shook them up and down enthusiastically. "Thank you ever so much. I just about had a heart attack when I saw she was gone. Oh, I'm so glad she's safe," he said, and then kept going until Michel felt like his arms were going to come off. "You're welcome. That's enough." When the man finally let him go, Michel's arms had gone numb. "I am ever so sorry," he said, scratching his head in embarrassment. I got too excited." The girl, hanging off her father's leg like a koala, said, "Don't get lost anymore, Daddy."
He's like a little baby. German accent.
"You are the one who got lost, Pumpkin," he said with a sigh. But he was too relieved to be angry at her, and his frown turned right upside down. Michel let out a satisfied sigh at the sight of them. He'd completed his mission successfully despite the trouble he'd run into along the way, and everything was all back to normal now. "So, did you bring her all here by yourself?" the man asked. Everything was all back to normal in the sense that he was finally back at square one. He still had his original problem to deal with. "I was here with my brother," he said timidly, "but we got split up." "See? I knew you were lost." "Oh, I knew you were lost, mister," the girl said. Ugh. He wanted to say he knew exactly where he was, but he knew an adult would see right through him. So he stared down at his feet in shame, at which the father let out a hearty laugh and set a hand on his head. "We'll help you find your brother, then. He's probably having a heart attack right about now, too." "He's not worried," Michel said under his breath, but secretly he hoped the girl's father was right. Of course he's worried! Michel told the girl's dad they were going to a pub on the main street. Just a few minutes later, they were standing across the street from it. It was amazing how much quicker it was when you had someone who knew the area to show you the way. And it made Michel feel that much worse about all the time he spent wandering through the back streets. Like Georges had said, the pub acted as a restaurant during the day. It was packed to the brim with men on their lunch breaks. Eating had always been a quiet affair in Michel's life, so this was a brand new experience for him. It felt like he'd come to a festival. Before long, they caught sight of a man pacing back and forth in front of the building. It was his brother, Georges. And when he spotted Michel, he frantically ran over, shouting, "Oh, Michel!" So frantically, in fact, he tripped over his own feet and face planted halfway there. Aww. But the bigger a fool Georges made of himself, the happier it made Michel. "What did I tell you?" the girl's father said, patting him on the shoulder. "Georges?" "Yeah?" After things had settled down and they'd parted ways with the girl and her father, Georges and Michel sat down for a late lunch. It was a very primitive meal, consisting of thin pieces of torn meat placed on slices of bread and eaten with only your hands. Michel was having a great deal of difficulty with it.
Were you worried about me?
He asked, trying to be as casual as possible. Georges took a swig of some watery wine to wash down what he had in his mouth, then pounded his chest a few times. He swallowed, opened his mouth, and let out an impressively colossal belch. Michel had never seen his brother act so unrefined, but apparently that kind of behavior was allowed here. It seemed to be even the norm.
The heck you talking about, kid? Of course I was. I just about had a heart attack when I saw you were gone. That was more excitement than you signed up for, huh? Mother would be very unhappy with you. I mean, yeah, I don't want to go through another one of her lectures,
Georgia said with a strained laugh. He looked softer and more affectionate than his usual vivacious self.
And mostly, I was scared something would happen to you, Michelle.
Michel's hand froze in midair, holding a piece of the meat on bread thing. The meat on bread thing.
I thought you would just laugh it off if you lost me, honestly. What do you think I am? Some kind of cold-hearted monster?
I'm just joking, Michel said, sneaking a peek at his brother's pouting face over his meat. He wanted to give a nice hearty laugh, but the most he could manage was a restrained smile. And for a child who didn't smile much at all, he'd done quite a bit of that today.
Hey, Georges. Yeah?
Sorry for disappearing on you like that.
George's jaw dropped.
Well, I'll be damned. I never thought I'd hear you apologize for anything, Michelle.
What do you think I am? Some kind of emotionless hobgoblin?
Haha, I'm just pulling your leg. I'm sorry for not keeping a better eye on you too.
Maybe if you weren't so busy looking at every single girl we walked past, that wouldn't have been a problem.
Come on, don't twist the knife. That's where we're supposed to hug and say, yeah, we both messed up.
Georges put his face in his hands and faked crying for a few seconds, and when he looked up again, he had a big smile on his face, which put a little bit of one on Michel as well. His father would never panic like that, no matter what happened to Michel. He was too concerned about appearances, but his brother was different. Georges got scared for him, almost cried for him, panicked so much he made a complete fool of himself. That was enough. Michel didn't have to be jealous of the girl and her father. His family loved him too, and he was happy he'd had the chance to see so for himself.
Hey, Georges. Yeah?
Let's do this again sometime.
Heck yeah! Next time Mum and Dad and our scary big bro are out, let's go.
It was extremely rare that they were all out of the house at the same time, so it was possible there would never be a next time. But Michel still dreamed of the day it would happen. Even if it was for a few years from now, as long as this wasn't the last time, he would be happy. And when he came back, he would go see that girl again. He'd go find her family's shop, and if there was a pair of leather sandals and a bag for sale, he'd buy them. And then he'd ask the girl what her name was. Would she even remember him in a few years? Would he even remember her in a few years? In all likelihood, neither of them would remember this day, but a little dream didn't hurt anyone. He could still feel her soft hand in his, and he could still see her big, inquisitive, jade eyes. Like two little balls of glimmering jade. Too precious for me. Let's end it there. It's too precious. I can't let that get sullied. I can't sully that beautiful story. Oh, jeez. Too precious. What are you gonna do for that one? I don't know. I'm gonna need, like, just a collection of art for that one chapter. I'm gonna start doing it right now. I know one bit, though, that I'm gonna really enjoy doing.
And that's gonna be like the main piece. But the rest of it, I can do like little comic stuff. Oh, you're so cute. I'm hoping there's more little breaks in the story stuff. With like little moments where I can just end, because it makes me want to read more. Versus the other ones where I'm just like, no, my heart. Yeah, it's almost like they place these specifically like this. We'll see how it goes. At the very least, the end one seems very happy. So, even if the rest are all downhill, that last one seems very positive. So, let's end it here. I'm gonna go make some tea. I'll go do some sketchies. And then watch some Dragon Guard 3.